Hello guys, me again, Nigel here with you. We're with the Nigel's Land Rover channel, and we've got part 5 now of the engine build. I know in the last video I started off by saying it was part 3 and it was actually part 4, so sorry about that. So yeah, today you can see I'm grovelling on the ground underneath my Mustang. No, the Mustang is up on its lift. I'll show you the lift. Here it is. It's a wonderful bit of kit, beautiful thing, and that's about as high as I can get it because the garage door wants to swing over and scratch the paint, so that's about as high as I can get it. But if I turn it round, I'll be able to get it all the way up, so that'd be cool. Anyway, you probably noticed why I'm wearing a coat. This is my blue coat from the old days at Rolls-Royce. This is where I did my apprenticeship and everything, and spent many years, many happy years actually. Rolls-Royce, fantastic company to work for, it was then. Really enjoyed it. So this is the old style coat. I've got one of the newer ones, which is a darker blue with all the silver flashing on it, which is real sexy. I'll show you that one day. But this is the old one. This is like pre-98, pre-2000, I think. So yeah, but they're great when you're doing stuff like building engines and stuff, because they're sort of lint free. They're pretty much fluff free. Plus you've got your pockets, you can put stuff in, feeder gauges and stuff like that. So really handy thing to have, and your clothes stay clean as well, so you can wipe your hands on them. So anyway, and there's a pocket there you can put your glasses in. Anyway, went to Asda this morning, got absolutely soaked. Something else I want to tell you. A couple of weeks ago I was in Asda, couldn't believe this, fancied a ribeye steak, and there's a girl there putting loads of meat in, you know, the packaged meat, pre-packaged meat on the shelf and everything in the fridge area, and they had no ribeyes on the shelf. So I said to this girl, I said, have you got any ribeye steaks there? And she said, I've never heard of them. I said, surely you know what a ribeye steak is. No, she said, all the meat we sell is Asda. God give me strength. I mean, really, come on. I've also just been listening to the Jeremy Vine show on Radio 2. Is that actually the most depressing, downtrodden bloody programme on the radio these days? I mean, all he talks about is depressing subjects. It's terrible. It's like he's winding all this sadness out of people. He wants people to phone in and tell him their sad stories. God almighty. Can't wait for 2 o'clock and then Steve Wright will be on. So anyway, this came today. Lovely young lady from DPD knocked on the door this morning and delivered a bag with these in. So these are my new main bearing bolts, and I couldn't believe it. They're actually genuine. They must be genuine because they come in a genuine packet, because Land Rover makes everything. They're made in Italy. There we go. There's the part number. You can see that. And the other are new stretch bolts, and we'll measure how long they are compared to the old ones as well. So I won't be filming those. You've watched me put these in enough, or the old ones in enough times. So I'm going to change all that over, put these new bolts in, and then we'll pick up from there. Also, Simon has been in touch and asked if I could show the demonstration on the end float on the crank, and I'll do that. I can also talk about tolerances as well. While I've got you on the screen, I've got this morning from the Transit 2.4 Tdci manual online, where they do actually give engine specs, not just torques but actual specs, clearances and stuff, which the Land Rover manual doesn't give at all. So once again, it's useless. I got soaked this morning. Anyway, so the end float of the crank, the tolerance, this is all in millimeters, is 0.09 to 0.305. Okay, so that's like 4 thou to 12 thou. The end float on the rods, so that's the amount the rods are allowed to slide around on the crank, we'll check that as well, is 0.1, that's 4 thou, to 0.32, so that's like 12 thou. The cam end float is 0.014, which is nothing, that's like, what's that, 7/10 of a thou, to 0.2, which is 8 thou. So you've got a hell of a tolerance on the cam end float. And then the piston ring end gaps, the top ring is 0.25 to 0.4, the second ring 0.5 to 0.75, and the third ring, the oil control ring, 0.25 to 0.5. I haven't actually checked my ring gaps because there was no issue with the engine burning oil. It had no issue with the bores. The rings aren't even bedded in yet. I remember I showed you half the ring isn't even worn. So yeah, really pleased with that. So I haven't bothered checking the ring gaps for fear that I might scratch the bores, because what you do when you do ring gaps, you put your ring down the bore and then you get a piston upside down and you just push it down so you know that it's square in the bore, and then with a feeler gauge you measure the gap in the ring. So if this used oil, I would assume the rings are worn and the gaps would be too big. If I had loads of marks and scoring and lines, I would assume the ring gap was too small because they've picked up. So and basically that's it. And if the ring gap is too small, you just file it with a diamond file and make sure you deburr the corners, don't leave any sharp edges on there. But that would be for another engine, not for this one. I don't need to ring gap this one. It's absolutely fine. I guess some people would say I should have checked it. I don't think I do need to, so there we go. So I'm going to get this bottom end put together, and same as I did before, tighten down probably this time to the 105 degrees, so I'll struggle. That's why the Mustang's lifted up, because I'm thinking if I slip and fall over and like fall into this door, it's just going to cave it in. The front wings are aluminum. They're aluminum because it's American. Okay, the body on the Land Rover is aluminium, but the hood and the fenders are aluminum. Okay, so there we go. This is an RS t-shirt, by the way. I used to have an RS. I part exchanged it from my Raptor, so I no longer have an RS. So I've got an RS baseball cap and an RS t-shirt, which no longer represents the vehicle I drive. So God, I talk some crap, don't I? I'll see you in a minute. Just let me show you something quickly, guys, as well. For those of you that don't have degreasing facilities, you might not have a little wash tank, you might not see the value in buying one if you're just building one engine or building one gearbox or something. So what I've got here is this is a large Vikinger hot dog jar. Okay, you need a large jar because some of the bolts are quite long. And basically I've got xylene in there, which is paint thinners, and you just put all your oily and covered, silicone covered bolts and everything in there, and just periodically give it a shake, agitate everything, and then all the oil's washed off them, it gets all the silicone off and everything, and then just blow them off or soak them in a rag, whatever. So you don't really need proper sort of washing. This is boxy. This is the ones that have come out this morning, and you can see the bolts come out with all the threads and everything, all lovely and clean. All the heads all spotless. So really good little tool for next to nothing. You get a gallon of xylene for a tenner, I don't know, and hot dogs there. These are about £2.19 from Tesco's, and they're quite nice. They're as long as the jar, so they're quite big, and they're about 1 inch in diameter, so they're quite nice with lots of ketchup and mustard on them. Okay, so here's the old bolts. These measure 100.5 millimeters long. I measured like 4 of them, and I measured 4 of the new ones before I put them in, and they were like 99.5, and they were all within a few microns. So either that's a new batch and they're made shorter, or they stretch a millimeter. And what I will say, you've all seen me struggle with this 105 degrees. With these, I put them in exactly the same, oiled the back of the heads, oiled the threads, torqued them to 45, torqued them to 80, and then 105 degrees. And every time, the 45, the 80 and the 105, you could kind of feel them stretching. It's very difficult to explain. With these, when I was torquing them, it was kind of, if I can get my arm in the shot, it's kind of, you pull back and it's like to a stop. With these, it was kind of, and you can feel it kind of, it's almost like dragging your fist through a bucket of sand instead of just coming up to a dead stop. It's very strange. And certainly on the 105 degrees, instead of it sort of just a constant pulling round to an angle, you could kind of feel it getting tighter. It was totally different. And my advice to anyone, just my personal advice, if you're going to rebuild one of these engines, put new bottom end bolts in, because they feel totally different. I know the manual says you can use them 4 times, but they certainly do feel like they're acting as stretch fasteners now rather than just ordinary bolts like they feel. So very interesting indeed. So this one's for Simon. He wanted to see how to do the end float. So basically I've got a clock here on a little mag base on the end of the engine, and I've got the clock on the end of the crank, and as you can see here, it's on 0, so I'll get down on my knees. There we go. So now I can put a screwdriver in up here in this gap, and I can lever the crank backwards, Okay, and we can see that when I lever the crank, I'm pushing the screwdriver, so the clock is on 0. So now if I go to the other side, okay, and I now pull on the clock to bring it forward, pull on the screwdriver, sorry, you can see that I've got 5,000. Now, you can actually do this with your hands if you're strong. You can actually pull it with your hands. But I would advise using a screwdriver just in case you haven't got a good sort of feel on it. But there you go. You can see this one's got 5 thou of end float, and the spec is 0.09 to 0.305. So that's like 4 thou to 12 thou. So we're at the lower end, so that's good. Simon also asked, what can you do about it if it's small or big or whatever? With these king bearings, the answer is nothing, because the only bearing that's doing the end float is the one that's actually in the block on number 3. If you remember, go back and have a look. It's got the, I don't know if we'll be able to see it. You can see down in there, where are we? Number 3. Of course, these bloody phones, the camera's off to one side. You can just see down in there where my finger's pointing, you can see the thrust bearing sticking out. If you look at number 2, you can see there's nothing there, you can see daylight. Whereas with number 3, you can see there's actually a bearing in there, okay? So that's what the crank is thrusting up against there and there, okay? Now that's a one-piece bearing, it's like a shell. So if your end float is too little or too big, there's nothing you can do. You could probably scrape the bearing to get the end float up. But I don't know what you do. If you had too much end float, probably means your crank's knackered. You've probably spun a bearing in there or something, or got some material between that and the crank. It probably means your crank's knackered. So have a look. The bearings that came in the engine, the actual float, the thrust bearings that are in there, were actually separate. So you could get the forward bearings, I guess, and get different thicknesses. But if the face is all chewed up on your crank, then it's scrap anyway. So, or it could probably be ground, and then you'd get thicker bearings, but I don't know how thick the bearings you could get. So that's how you do your end float, Simon. So there we go, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to check our end float on our con rods when we fit them, and that's basically the amount of float you get in the con rod in between these. You can see you've got thrust faces here and here on the crank, here and here. So it's basically the amount of rocking. If you have too much movement there, then it'll knock about, and it's, you know, you want it to be sort of fairly stable in there. You don't want it all floating around too much. You'll also lose the oil pressure if you've got loads of side float. So anyway, what would you use oil pressure? I guess if you've got a nice tight clearance there, the oil's not going to escape as easily as it is if you've got no clearance. But then here we've got no land anyway, so I'm talking rubbish again. Don't listen to me, guys, I'm bloody useless. Okay then, guys, so here we are, finally it's piston time, and you can see we've got the 4 pistons laid out on the bench here. They're all numbered nicely from the factory. You've got a number on the end there, 1, 2 and so on. So that's pretty cool. So that was done from the factory, so that was good of them. The other thing I've done, if you can see on here, there's a very faint, you can see this eye on here, and then you can see it on there just sort of tapped in. I don't know why they've got an eye there, I don't know if it's inlet side or what, I haven't worked it out yet. But I've just basically gone down with a Sharpie and just made a pen mark on them, just so I know, a quick glance I can see that they're going the right way around. As I said before, these rods are cracked. You can see that the line where the split isn't straight at all. You can see this one's got a chunk missing out of it. And they're put onto a jig, and they just literally break one half off. So they completely machine the bore in there. They drill and tap the hole and everything, and then they just snap them off. So you've actually got that broken metal face going together. I don't remember if I showed you, so I'll show you now. If I can get this bolt undone, here we go. Also, we're going to be replacing these bolts. That's the part number there, LR004385 by 5. You need 8 of them, but they come in 5s, so which is dead handy, so you have to buy 10. So if we quickly look at this, you can see on this end face, where are we? You can see on this end face, it's very, it's got something on it, but it's also, you can see that it's just a broken face, and basically the con rod is the same. You can see here. So they're basically just going to go together and lock together. So because they're broken, they came apart from each other, they're going to go back together exactly the same. So you don't need dowels or anything to get an alignment done. So that's what we need to do. Now to fit these, we're going to need what's called a spring compressor, and they come in all sorts of different sizes and guises. This is the most common one. You can pause there and read the instructions. This is a very good tips. This one I've had for probably 35 years, I'm guessing. So you can tell if you look after them, use them properly, they'll last you a long time. This is just a cheap draper one. Saying there 57 to 125 millimeters. So yeah, I probably bought this actually when I was 16 for doing mopeds. No, you wouldn't, because you put the barrel over the top of the piston, don't you? Shut up, Nigel. But if you're going to build an engine, you need these. Okay, you cannot put a car engine together. You can do a motorcycle because the barrels slide down over the piston. The bottom of the barrel's got a taper in it. But with a car, the pistons have to go in from that side up under here. So you have to go in that way, and of course you've got a sharp edge, so you need to compress the rings, because as you can see the rings are all sticking out. You need to compress the rings and get them in their compressed state, and then you just push the piston through into the bore. And you can see that on here, on one side of the ring compressor, you've got these 4 sort of dents, and they're not dents from where it's worn out. What it is they're little raised areas. You can see there it's a raised area, and that stops the piston ring compressor going down the bore with the piston that just sits on the face. So I'll show you that. I'll get the camera on a tripod, and I'll show you all that. We're also going to get everything. This is all got to be very well oiled up and everything, so you get good sliding through. You don't want to scratch the pistons. So there we go. So let's get on and do one, and then I'll show you one, and then I'll do the other 3 off camera, and then we'll come back. Okay, so as we said, the first thing we need to do is make sure we get this this ring compressor well oiled up. So I'm going to put plenty of oil in there. That's why I've got a glove on, so it doesn't get in underneath my nails and everything. What nails I've got. And then I'm also going to go round the piston and make sure we've got plenty of oil on there as well. So just dip my fingers in and then go around the piston and make sure the piston is well lubricated and all the rings and everything are well lubricated. And that way, when you're turning it over and everything's all nice, then everything's all nicely oiled, then it's all going to be cool. I've also poured some oil over the small ends, so they've got some oil to be going on with. So there we go. So that's that done. Right, now the first thing we need to do is make sure we got the rings right. So our top ring is here, okay, so our gap is there. So our second ring, we're going to have the gap here. So we'll turn the ring. So the gap is here. So what we'll do is get the gaps 120 degrees apart. So our oil control ring should have its gap there, and it's already there. So I'm going to turn that oil control ring so that the gap is away from that slot, okay, and then I'm going to turn this one now and that one so that we don't have the you can see you've got these little slots in here, and I don't want the gap of the oil control ring to be on one of them. So I'm going to do the oil control ring first. So there's the oil control ring there. The top ring can go here, so we've got one there, one there. So we want the other ring to have the gap there. So there we go, they're 120 degrees opposed. So what I can do now, I don't know if you can see the vise, you can't. What I'm going to do is put this in the vise, and then I'll move the camera. So I'm just going to put this in the vise, just so I can kind of hold it like that. And then I'll bring the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. There you go. And then we're going to put the ring compressor on. Now these come with a square, like a square Allen key type thing, like a lever arm, but I haven't got one, I just use a 1/4 inch extension. So I'm going to put this gently over the piston. I'm going to open it up some more first, I think. There we go. Because I don't want to be catching those rings as I slide it down. Okay, so I'm going to hold it on the piston there. And then I can wind this up, and you can hear it ratcheting around. Just a final check, just to make sure those rings are actually at 120 degrees. One there, one there. One there, one there, and one. Let's just move that one round a touch. There we go. So we've got one there, one there, one there. That's happy with that. So slide that down over. Push that in there. and I'm going to lift the compressor up. You can just compress the rings. You want to make sure that the ring compressor stays square on the piston. It should square itself up. Okay, and it does need to go pretty tight. And you want it to be clamped all around the bottom of the piston there. You don't want any gaps in it. So I can see there that it's not quite square. It's tipped over slightly, so I'm just going to undo it a touch. So what you do, you don't snap it, you do it up, and you, while you're pulling it, undo the ratchet and then let it wind out on its own. Okay, don't ever just snap that off, because that will actually break the spring steel. So what I'm going to do now is just tip it over a bit, because it's a bit of an angle. There we go. So make sure I get it nice and square. Get it on a bit further actually. And then we can wind it in. There we go, that's clamped nice and tight. Because it's all oiled and nicely and everything, it doesn't matter how tight you have it, it'll be absolutely fine. So there we go, that's that. I'm going to move over to the engine now and show you what we're doing. I can see it from here actually. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to make sure that my big end bearing in the crank is clean. Okay, so that's all clean, and I've got some oil on my finger, so I'm making sure that's clean. And I want to make sure that this bearing is up high, because we're going to turn the block over. I'm going to drop the piston in from the other side. So I'm going to take this glove off so I don't get everything covered in oil. So I'll swivel the block over. There we go, so we can see the top face now. And make sure the bore is well oiled. And then we're going to drop that piston down in there. Okay, so the next thing we need to do now is make sure we've got the piston the right way round. So not only have we got number 1 in number 1 bore, but if you look down in here, you will see, if the camera will focus, come on, you can see here, you can see the oil squirter, the piston cooling jet is sticking up. And that needs to be on the right side of the piston, because we need to get the piston right around, otherwise the piston skirt will hit it. So you can see on the bottom of the pistons here, there's an undercut here on the side. So we need to make sure that that undercut is actually on that side, and then that squirter jet will sit up in there when the piston reaches bottom dead center. So we'll do that and make sure we get the piston in the right way around. One more thing quickly, when we put the piston in, we're going to have to tap it in, and generally people use the butt of a hammer. You just tap it in with the end of a hammer. Be very careful what you're using, have a good look. If you've got a hammer like this, with this rubber, it may be all broken and full of debris. It could be broken off like that, and you might have the steel sticking through. You really don't want to be hitting it with that. Okay, so that's one to look out for. And then also you might have one like this, where again it's all rubbery and full of debris and stuff. You really don't want to be hitting it with that. You want to be hitting it with something which is clean and fresh. And the bottom of this one is like new, so we'll be using this one. We're going to gently tap it, but you don't want to be, there's no need to hit it with steel, and there's no need to, you know, unnecessarily add debris. So we'll get the piston right way around and we'll get it in now, finally. Right, so we've got a drop of assembly lube on the bearing there, and then we've got the piston cut out here, so we've got to make sure the piston cut out is on this side, so it's going to be facing you. So this piston's going to go in that way round. So I can drop this down the bore, making sure the comm rod doesn't hit the sidewalls, and then I can drop the piston down into the bore just like that. You can see the piston ring compressor is now suspending the piston. Okay, now because of the rings, the piston won't drop down into the bore, but just in case, I'm going to have my hand underneath, because if it does fall, it'll hit the crank and damage it, so that's something you don't want. So we're just going to check we have actually got the right orientation. Yes, we have. You need to make sure that the comm rod is this way, and then we can just gently tap the piston into the bore. So I'm going to put my hand underneath just to protect the crank should it fall. Just tapping it down. That ring compressor may actually be slightly too tight. Sounds obviously as much, very hard at all. There we go, you can see the ring compressor pop off, and our piston is in the bore, suspended by the friction of the rings. Okay, so now we can just check that and check it's nice and smooth. You don't want it to be, if it's going juddery or something, there's something wrong. So you want it nice and smooth. Just going to give that face a quick wipe, because I'm a tart. And then we can turn the block over gently. Hear the com rod there hit the side of the bore. So turn the block over, keep our fingers on the piston just in case. Okay, and we can see down inside there now. I don't know if you can see, but we've actually got the, let's get the camera there for you. You can see there's the com rod sitting there to the side. Nothing's getting damaged, nothing's getting hurt, and we're good to go. So there we go. One tip, if your bearings don't slip really tightly into your com rod, take the bearing out before you tap the piston, or the bearing will fall out. So you can always put it in afterwards. So now we're going to get underneath and we're going to pull that piston up through. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'll try not to get my great big head in the way. I'm going to put my fingers in here just to keep that rod over, and then we can push the piston up, or you can actually turn the crank down to the rod if you want to. But it's easier to have everything up on top, and then we can make sure the rod is nice and free. It's not going to gouge into the crank or anything, and then just put up like that, and that's it. Job done. So now we can come along with the drop more of our assembly lube. Okay, so I've got the right bearing cap here now. You can see I've got some assembly lube on there. And then we've got number 1 bearing cap. The pen line is on this side to match the pen line on that side. Everything is nice and clean. Faces are good and clean. So I can just drop this down onto there, like so. And that'll just sit on there. And then I'm going to take a couple of new bolts. Just a small amount of oil on the threads and a drop on the heads, just like so, and then drop the bolts in. Remember, we've already done all our bearing clearances and everything, so this is just assembly now. This is the fun bit. So we've got those in now finger tight, just like so. So I'll get my socket, torque wrench and everything ready, and then we'll torque them down. Okay, so this E14 socket for this one, it's those Torx type bolts. So I'm just going to come up with the ratchet and just gently, as I say, as I always do, just gently pull them down. Just a quick look to make sure that those faces have gone together and everything's smooth, there's no steps. So you know the faces have gone together properly. And then we're going to torque these down to 30 Newton meters. Okay. Like so, double check, 30 Newton meters, and then we're going to go 80 degrees. So that's what the manual spec is for these. So put that in there like that. Let's get it round to the next one. The camera's in the way, believe it or not, so I may struggle to get this. So, God, that's tight. Turn that round to there. So it's on 0. And then I've just got to go to 80 degrees, which is the last thick mark before 90. So I'm going to put my feet in the engine stand. So let's see if I can get this round. Yeah, look at that doddle. Okay, and then we'll do the same on this one. Always look at your starting point, that's what I'm finding. That's the bit that matters the most. It's no good starting with it, you know, in your chest. You need to get some leverage on it, so it needs to be sort of perpendicular to you, really. So we'll get on there, and then we can come round in one smooth movement to 80 degrees. Again, they feel absolutely lovely pulling down, because they're new. So we can see we've got some end flow on there. So for whoever's interested, we're now going to measure the end flow on that bearing. Now the actual specified is 0.1 to 0.32, so that's 4 thou to 12 thou. I've got some imperial feeler gauges here, so this is 4 thou. Now remember, when you look at the crank, I don't know if you can see that up here, can you? Yes, you can. There's no land there, so it's no good checking it. You need to check it down the sides. So this is 4 thou, so I'm going to push the rod back as high as I can, and then that 4 thou is falling in there. Okay, so let's take a 6 thou, so that's 0.15, and that won't go in. So we know we're about 5 thou, so that's 0.125 on a spec of 0.1 to 0.325. So 0.125, this engine's really good. All the specs are like tight, so that's good. So the least amount of end float you can have on there, the best. And what I am going to do is just put in a drop of oil so that it can capillary around in that little gap, so that when we turn the engine over it's not dry. Because remember, everything's been cleaned, everything's all lovely and smooth. Now look at that, I can still turn that engine over by hand with one piston in there, so that's cool. We can feel we've got no tight spots. It's all good, and we can see down there. I can just show you if I get the camera down. If you can see this down in there, if I'm going to leave it light. You can see down in there we've got the oil squirter jet, and I can put that torch on there. You will see that as the piston comes up, if I can do this, as the piston comes up, you can see that cutout in the piston. The cutout in the piston is where that squirter jet is, if the bloody camera would focus. There you go. So you can see that cutout's there. So we're all good. So I'm going to get the rest done now, and then I'll come back. Okay, so doing number 4 now. When I did cylinder number 1, you saw me hitting the piston. I was having to hit it quite hard. I think I was over tightening the piston spring compressor, I guess. So I'll just show you fitting this one, number 4, and I don't have the compressor done up so tight, but you will see here that when I tap this down, it goes in a lot easier. Okay, so that's really what you want to be aiming for, not having to hit it as hard as I did before. So that was just something I wanted to show you there. There we go, all done up, all torqued down, and I can still just move it. He says the friction of the pistons in the bores is quite difficult to overcome, but don't worry if you get the same situation as this. It's very unusual, in fact very rare indeed, that you can actually turn the crank over by hand like this with the pistons in there, particularly on a V8 or something. You've got no chance. But yeah, it's very unusual to be able to turn it even with 2 pistons in there. So obviously everything's all well oiled, but I can. No, I can't. I thought I could move it, but I need 2 hands. So that's nothing unusual. So especially with that sticky goo in there as well, that sort of stickies everything up. So over to the bench. Here you can see this is our box of bolts now, and these are all the bolts that you replace. So you've got your conrod bolts here. You've got these are our main bearing bolts here that we just did, and then we've got our head bolts here. So you've got, I think it's 10 of these or 8 of these. These are like M10, and then you've got 8 or 10 of these. These are M8, and don't ever throw them away. You never know when you're going to need them. I mean, that is a very long M10 bolt, and I think I may need these actually to put the engine onto the engine stand once I fitted the flywheel, because I've got to fit the flywheel on here to time everything up. So it needs to be on the engine stand, ideally, with the flywheel in place. So I'm going to have to actually space this out. It is okay, I've seen it done. I found a German video of a guy rebuilding a transit engine, and he had the flywheel on. He was actually a Ford representative, so obviously the block can take it. So there we go. Now I've got my book. So the next thing we're going to do is fit the ladder frame, which is an aluminium frame that goes on. If I show you the manual here, you'll be able to see what it is we're looking at. Here we go. So you can see we've got the it's telling us here, there we go, we've done the main bear, the conrods I mean. So now it's telling us we've got to put the bolts in for the ladder frame, and just put them in finger sight, and we've got to line up all the edges and stuff. And this here, look at this picture here and memorize it. Okay, so they're telling you to put this jig here, bolt that into your ladder frame. Here, there's the ladder frame and there's the engine block. So there's your front of your crank here with the 3 holes. You've got your 2 timing gears, and then you've got, well, the oil pump gear and the timing gear, and then you've got here, there's the joint where the ladder frame's joining the block, and you've got this jig which you bolt to the side, and you make sure that it's parallel here. Okay, mesmerize that picture. Here's the block. So where's the, so I've got my bloody camera on a tripod again, nightmare. So where's the area here where you get it flush to? It's wrong again. So there we go. So luckily I've got my book as well. This is something you wanna do if ever you're stripping your engine and rebuilding it. I keep going on about this. There's box E. You can see here there's box E. Okay, all the bolts in there are all cleaned up. And then in this book I've got written box E, and then I've got oil pickup pipe, oil pump. These are all the different bolts. You can see here we've got ladder frame. So we've got 3 times M8 by 35 and 19 M8 by 80. Okay, so obviously with that massive difference there's not going to be any issues about where they go. What I have done, if you look here, I showed you this before, this is the big aluminium casting that goes up the side of the engine. Your air con goes on the top here, if you've got it. So I've actually done a diagram to show where all different bolts go, because you've got 30, 50, 30, 52. So, you know, the M830 there. So it's only a small difference, so to make sure you don't get the right bolts or the wrong bolts in the wrong holes. So that's well worth doing. So I'm going to go and get the ladder frame and some gaskets, and we'll have a look at getting that on. Okay, so here you can see the ladder frame. This is the large aluminium casting that goes on the bottom of the engine, and the sump bolts on here. This one I got it out, it was already clean, but it had some corrosion on it, so I've gone over it with the wire brush and everything and then washed it all off. So now I need to let it dry, and there's all water in all these oil holes, the threaded holes for the sump and everything. So I'm going to leave it in the house to dry where it's warm by a radiator, and then get this fitted on tomorrow, I think, rather than risk putting it on wet, because the engine will be sat here not doing much, and any moisture is going to hang around and just corrode. So one thing I did want to talk about was, if you remember, we talked about the ability to change those oil cooler jets without taking the engine out. Just take the sump off. When you remove your sump, this is what you're going to see. The oil pump will be here, the oil pickup tube's here, but there's no reason why you couldn't take that off, but you're still not going to get to them. You can just about see through there, you can just about see them through there. There's no way you're going to get to number 4. So really it's going to be an engine out job, because to take this off you would have to remove the front cover, and you're going to disturb your rear seal. So that would mean removing the flywheel, so you have to take the engine out anyway. So I don't think you're going to get this off without taking the engine out. Maybe you can, I don't know. But there's a hell of a lot of bolts to this. So really, you know, if you're thinking about oil cooler jets, then, or piston cooling jets they're called, then I would really be tempted to, you know, to take your engine out and give it a refresh like this. So I'm not really replacing anything, I'm just giving it a good clean and a refresh, just decoking all the, you know, getting all the EGR crap out of everything, and cleaning up the valve seats, replacing the bolts. It doesn't cost very much. The gasket set's probably the most expensive part. I think all the bolts together cost about £100, if that. It's, you know, it's not an expensive, you know, if you're not replacing any parts, you could probably rebuild this engine for about £300 if you want to do it yourself. So anyway, so we'll call it a day, I think, for this video, purely because I want to get something out tonight, and I'm not going to do any more on this now till tomorrow. So okay, so change of plan. It's been sunny, unbelievably, a little bit breezy, so this dried off lovely, and I've given it a blowout with the airline and that, and now it's all ready to go. So we can go for it. Now these are the gaskets, Victor Rhines, and apparently these are OEM, and if you're looking for the part number, there it is. And this is part of a, if you look around, you'll see these places advertise this as a headset, and it's not, it's a full engine set. So shop around, the prices vary from like 150, I think, 120, up to like 300 odd pounds. So shop around, make sure you're paying the right money. But it's a very, very nice set. It comes with all the proper sealants and everything, for the sump and the front cover, and they are also very professionally made gaskets. I've never seen anything like this before, with these they're a metal gasket with a coating, and they've got these cork gaskets on them. I don't know what the earth they're for, but I think actually they're going to have to come off. So we'll have to see where we go from there. But I'll compare it in a minute to the old gaskets. But on the end here as well, you can see there's this little lump of like a silicon sealant type thing, like a felt foam stuff. So that's going to ooze out when we squeeze it down, and then the rear cover is going to go, the rear seal is going to go on there. But I'll probably put a little bit of extra silicone around there anyway. But this here I need to work out what on earth this cork gasket is for, because the old ones didn't have it. We can look at this one here. This is the same. This has got it on, and I don't think it's supposed to be there, so we may have to do a bit of rework on this. So let's have a look at the original ones and go from there. Okay, I've worked it out. The cork is there to protect it in the transit. You actually take the cork off, and this raised lip around here, this is actually designed to go into the block. I'll show you. This will go. We've got a hole here. Okay, this is a main gallery hole, but this here is just a tooling hole. It's a blind hole. So that actually, sorry, wrong way around. Duh. That actually goes into that hole and aligns the gasket. So the cork, I thought was there, like you used to get on the old head gasket stuff. You get a cork around the oil ring or around the main oil gallery. But no, the cork is there just to protect it from damaging the other gaskets during transit. So got some cork gaskets now, cork washers. So there we go. Hang them on my hat and be like an Aussie. So the other thing I wanted to talk about on here, I can show you, is if you look at this block, I don't know if you can see it. If I zoom in, you should be able to see it. This is like a ploughed field. This is really rough. You can see the milling marks and I can feel them. So if I had a big grinding machine, I would have ground it flat again, or milled it if I had a mill. But I don't have access to any of that, so I couldn't. So what I intend to do is, because these gaskets go on with this face down, okay, you can see this face is going down, and we've got actually a recess in there. So my plan is I'm going to put a little layer of silicone all around and follow that around, and just a small bead, just to give that extra bit of help, because it had an oil leak down here. It's one of the reasons I took the bottom off. It's because it had this side of the engine was all wet. I'll put a photograph up and show you. But yeah, so I think I'll seal this up and try and keep the engine dry. Okay, so for this I'm going to use the Worth Super Silicon RTV, because I know it's very good for this sort of thing. So I've got a razor blade here. So the idea is to put some of this in and then sort of scrape it and just try and make sure that I don't have too much on there. Just really want to get some in that recess. Because one of the issues we'll have here is these bolts are only torqued up to like 18 pounds-feet. So there we go. So now we should be able to get our razor blade and just go over and scrape it so that it's only in the groove. I know a lot of you Land Rover guys just sat there watching this thinking, oh my god, this guy's a bloody tart. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I am, a great big tart. But I hate oil leaks. I really cannot stand oil leaks. And the last engine I built had oil leaks when I got it. I rebuilt the engine. I kept the car for a good year, 18 months. And it never rattled, never leaked a drip. So it can be done. Right, so I'm going to switch the camera off and get this other one done, because I don't want to bore you to tears again, like I usually do. So I'll see you in a minute when I fit them on. Okay, so hopefully you can see, the light's getting a bit dim, but all I've got is just silicone now in that groove. There's nothing else. There's a very thin smear obviously everywhere else where I've gone over, but nothing's going to be oozing out, I don't think. I want to make sure I don't have anything on these edges that's going to ooze. Just because I'm in a big girl's blouse, and then I'm going to fit these in. So I'll get the camera moved around so you can see what I'm doing, because you want to see all of it. Now these faces have been cleaned with brake cleaner. That's right on the edge there, that's a bit dodgy. There's an oil way there. Oil gallery. Yeah, so the faces have been cleaned with brake cleaner on both the engine block and the ladder. So there we go. So that's done that. Now I'm just going to grab a cloth, just give it a quick rub just to make sure you don't have any excess silicone anywhere. That is really dodgy, that is right on that edge. Don't like that at all. The whole gasket could do with going back a bit, I think, actually. I can perhaps tweak that a bit, but I guess there's a bolt holding it down there, so it should be okay. Right, so we can drop the ladder frame on now. This has no dowels, no nothing, so it just goes on and then you have to position it yourself. So it's what is stopping it going down? Me being an idiot, that's what's stopping it going down. There we go, that's it, it's down. So I'm not going to slide it around because I don't want to move those gaskets. Now we got, over on the bench here, we have got a load of bolts. So we're going to put all those bolts in, and then we've got to then position the the frame so that it's in the correct location. And they talk about having these jigs and stuff, which is a bit of garbage. I'm just going to do it by feel. Basically we want the front flush and the back flush and to be square that way. So I'm just going to put these bolts in finger tight. In fact, I'll turn the camera off. If you don't want to watch me do this, then I'll come back when they're in. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the back end of the block. This is the engine stand, this is the crankshaft. And I realise the light's a bit bad because I need to get a light in behind to show you what I'm doing. So this is the ladder frame. Can't think of the name of it then. So now what we need to do is make sure the back of this is parallel with the back of the block. So what I'm doing, I've got a light here as you can see. And then what I'll do is zoom you in actually so you can see better what I'm doing. Okay, so this is the block here where I'm touching now, and then this is the ladder frame here. That little black thing you can see sticking out, that's a bit of the silicone sticking out the back of the gasket. So if I put this like this, you can see there that when I put that like that, you can see I've got light showing underneath on the second half. So I need to tap the ladder frame forward. And as you can see then, the gap closes up and then we've got no light coming through. So I know now it's parallel. And then do the same on the other side. And then just tighten it all down. So they talk about using bars and everything, but I know a razor blade has got a perfectly straight edge and also it's a very fine edge, so it'll let any light through. So it's a really good way to make sure it's all parallel. So see you in a minute. Okay, so I've nipped all the bolts down now, just sort of finger tight, and checked front and back and everything, and all looking good. So we've got a sequence to work to now, and we've got 22 bolts to work to a sequence to. So we've got number 1 here, let's get that one down, 2 and 3, then we've got 4, 5 is over here, And we've got 6 is here, 7 is here, believe it or not 8 is here, 9 is over here, and we've got, where's 10? 10's down here, 10's down here, that's the 10 there. Then we got 11, nope, 11's here, sorry. Then, this is crazy, 12 is that one down in there, and then 13's over here, and then 14 is up here, 15 is there, 16, believe it or not, is there, and then we're coming all the way back here again for 17 and 18, and then we've got 19, this is crazy, 19 and 20, 21 and 22, and I've got to go around and do that now until they all go click on the torque wrench. So there we go, that's it. That's the ladder frame all on. I've cleaned up the ends, I've sort of pushed the silicone into the gap if you like, and then when we do the front cover obviously there'll be a bead of silicone around here and there's silicone already in that gap. The front, this is obviously milled slightly shorter than the block because the front has a step, whereas the back is, as you saw, is very parallel. So I did actually nip the bolts down about 1/4 of a turn, and then I had to manipulate it again and just keep manipulating it until it's absolutely right, but it's absolutely dead flush on the back now. It's just so that when you put the rear seal on, the main seal, that it's got a pretty flat face to go up against. You if you have your faces like this nice and flat, then the seal will sit flat. If you have a big step, then you'll have a gap where the seal will go, and also the seal won't run parallel with the crank, and then the seal will actually be wiping the crank as it goes round rather than just turning inside it. So that's why you always want to make sure your seals are nice and square. So anyway, it's nearly 8 o'clock, so I don't mind if I do. I think we'll do this and basically, yeah, I'm enjoying that. So today is the first day we can actually go into pubs and stuff, but I think they're going to be really, really busy and really, really crowded, and I don't know if I want to be in crowds anymore. I can't remember the last time I was in a crowd. long time ago. So anyway, I'm going to call it a day for now, and then we'll come back tomorrow. I've got to get this turned over, get this onto my little lift-in trolley, and then we'll fit the rear main seal, and then we'll fit the flywheel and do all the timing and everything, which I haven't ever done before. In fact, most of what you're seeing I've never done. I've built engines, but I've never built a Puma engine, so everything you'll see me doing is new, really. But yeah, we need to get the engine time, because everything comes off the flywheel on this. You've got a flywheel position sensor, which is basically your crank position sensor, and it's adjustable. So we need to get that back in the right position. We need to find top dead center, and I'll show you how to do that properly rather than just using a clock, and then we'll go from there. So see you in a minute. Well, see you tomorrow, isn't it? Not in a minute. So I'm going to have my beer now, which is what I like to do. Nice. I like beer. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye.